Well, in this video, we're actually going to achieve this and hopefully get them all the way back home. But here we have some energy miners that have moved from the home room over here to the target room and actually extracted resources from the source. So let's jump over the code and actually implement this and get them to take that energy back home. So I've made a couple of changes here. The first thing you need to change is in your identify sources. So there was an issue where it was overriding the values each time. So the first thing we want to check for is if there is a object at room memory dot resources. If there's not, which is what this exclamation point means, then it's going to create an empty object. Next, we're going to check to see if the current room name has already been defined with an object. If it hasn't, then we're going to do the code below. So this just does multiple checks to sort of build the object as we go down. So that's the first big change. Next thing, make a new role energy miner and just copy over your functions from harvester. And then we're also going to make a little change to the spawning code. I'm going to rename key to target room name to make it a little more clear. And then you're going to have to update the references here and here. Okay, with those changes made, this becomes a little more clear, but we'll still come back to this and clean it up when we move it into a dedicated spawning role within each one of these roles here. The next thing we're going to be doing is making a change here, but I'm going to jump back over to Energy Miner and show you where this is called. So I was playing around with passing a parameter, but this isn't something we actually have to do since this is defined in memory. So we're going to save it like that. And this is more or less the exact same code as harvester. It's just you need to change the references to the object here. So what we're going to be changing is this harvest energy code, and that is found in creep functions. So creep prototype.harvest energy. So the first thing we need to do is make sure the creep is actually in its target room. If it's not, we need to move it there. So what we're going to do is check to see if there is a target room defined in its memory. If there is, and that target room is not equal to the creep's room name, that one it's currently in, it's going to return this function. So here we have another prototype called move to room, and it's going to take a room name as a variable, and we're going to get that from the memory, the target room name. And what it's going to do is call this.moveTo and a room position object. So we're going to use a constructor from the documentation here. So if we jump over the documentation, go to room object, not room object, room position. Yep. So with room position, we have a constructor, and we can make a new room position object by calling this constructor. So we do new room position, an X, a Y, and a room name. So back here in the code, we have an X, a Y, and the room name that's been passed to it. And we're just going to use like the center position of that room as a default. What this return does is it stops the execution of the rest of the code in this function. So once we get to here and we realize that we're not in the right room, we can just tell the creep to move to that other room and ignore the rest of the checks down here. The other thing that we're going to want to do is create some code to tell the creep where to go back to. So in the spawning code, we need to have something that says like homeroom. So, and this value is going to be the value right here. It's the name. And it's going to get this room value from the spawn code. So whatever room spawned it will be designated as the home room, and we can save that guy. And now new energy miners will spawn with that value. Okay, so what do we want to do with that? Well, we have this energy miner. Let's make sure this one's going to the right. Source ID A. Yep. What about this guy? A. B, C. Another way you can define these parameters within the memory is doing, you can sort of drill down. So we have rooms here and we have an object, W7N4. Here in the Explorer, you can just do rooms.w7n4 to go directly to that. This is helpful when you have multiple rooms and you only want to update the code for the room object for a single room and not overwrite changes that could be happening in the background while you're making those changes. So here we have the two objects, C9. So this is C9 and this is 7A. So it doesn't look like our code was spawning any for C9, so let's go ahead and delete that last spawn and see if that fixes the problem. There's a harvester, here's an energy miner. And let's see what his target destination is. So that one was going here. Seven A, so it's sending all of them to 7A for some reason, rather than B6. So make sure there's nothing wrong in this code right here. For each data, should be that target room names values, which is this energy. So now we're in here. For each one of these keys, it should be executing this code. So this one is saying to go to B6, but it went down to... Oh, okay. So the source ID was defined, but it's heading to the other source. So let's update the code to actually say, to actually move to the correct source ID rather than just source. So this is one of the problems with building it on the fly versus actually like creating a UML document or outlining what all the parameters are going to be. But if you're like most programmers, you don't have the patience to do that, so you end up with this sort of issue where you have different variable names in different classes or different objects. So being consistent at least will make things a lot easier. But the problem I had here was with spawning, I'm defining source ID, and in creep functions, I'm looking for something called source to find energy source. So we're going to change this guy. If this dot memory dot source ID, I think it's lowercase. Yep. So we're just going to make a new variable at source, and if this memory dot source ID source equals game.get object by ID, and then that value. So if there's no source, so if source hasn't been defined, or if it doesn't find an object with a source ID, it's going to run this code. Let's clean that guy up. Yep. And we can delete this guy and this bit here. Shift tab, and then we can do enter. Let's keep a little bit of spacing here. So if there is a source ID defined, it's going to set that source to it's going to set this variable source to that source object. If it still hasn't found one because there wasn't one predefined, then it's going to look through the different sources in the room and find one that has an open position and set source. Oh, little problem here. That variable has already been defined, so we don't want to redefine it. So now if there's a source, because it had one predefined or it found one in the room, it's going to set the source in memory to source.id and return the actual source object. Okay, so harvest energy. That code should work now. And it should be going to the proper source. We're going to go now to our energy miner and change this code right here. What does it do when it actually is full? So here what we're going to do, well, two actions. We want to move to homeroom, and so first we're going to do something very similar to this guy. We're going to copy this and move it into energy miner. But all we need is this bit, this dot creep dot move to new room position, creep memory dot home room. And we also need the if check from creep functions. If creep dot memory dot homeroom and creep memory dot homeroom is not equal to creep room name, creep move to the homeroom. So if it's not in the homeroom, move there first. Next, if creep back up, let storage equal creep room dot storage. Okay, so in the room object, back in the documentation, we have storage and terminal as defined variables. If there's a storage or if there's a terminal, it's going to be defined here. Otherwise, it's going to return undefined because there won't be an object here. So what we can do is do a little check here. So if there's, let's get a storage object here. And if storage, so if there is an object there, creep, now let's do a check to make sure it's in range. So using something similar to this harvester code. So if the creep position is near to storage, creep transfer storage, it will be the target, and resource energy will be the transferred resource. Otherwise, creep move to storage. And let's give that a shot. Working true, so it should be going home now. Energy mining. If creep memory working, if creep.memory.homeroom and creep memory homeroom is not equal to room name, creep move to new room position. All right, here's the issue. The issue is we're not returning here and preventing the code from going down here, because now it's looking for a storage that doesn't exist and trying to move to it. So let's save that code. And now we have creeps going to their proper destination, proper source. Same problem, it's not moving back home though. Creep, and let's try this here. So we should be seeing some code here showing that executing, but it's not logging. Creep memory.homeroom and creep room.name. Let's make sure the script's updating. Different problem. So the issue is that in main, we haven't updated this reference here. So energy miner should be var role energy miner. Then role. Oh. Let's see if we can just comment all those guys out. Save. Creep.harvest energy is not a function. So we probably need these two back in here. but all these should be defined down below. Save. Alright, so we have an energy miner that's full, and he's going to move back and hopefully deposit in the storage. It looks like one's gotten back so far. There we go. Energy's been deposited. So now we can write some functions to actually use this energy, move it to the controller, or build new structures with it. And the storage structure is really nice because by default it has 1,000,000 storage versus 50 to 200 energy that can be stored at various levels here, or 300. So this gives us a lot more of a buffer to work with to be able to go back and forth and do things like trading on the market and having a little bit of a reserve just in case the room gets attacked and can't go mine from other sources. So that's some basic code using the move to function and the room position object to create the targets. And we can just keep editing the code a little bit to add new target sources, and it would spawn creeps to go to each of one of those. Next steps on this, we probably have to do something to deal with this invader before we can actually go harvest from that room. Right now there's this issue where this guy is going to reserve this controller and prevent us from actually harvesting any energy here. So first thing is to destroy this structure and then to reserve the room so that we can prevent this thing from taking over again. Anyway, see you around in the next episode. If you have more questions or comments, let me know either on the Slack forums or down below, and I'll try to make a video covering those topics in Screeps. Thanks for watching, guys.